Dr. Jessica, Erika Smith, our boss, certainly, and myself, we were joined by Leo Mills with the Grand Lodge, as well as Dr. Michael Bradshaw with Samaritan's Lodge, and then Fanon Khaldun, who is the chair president of the African Diaspora Heritage Trail, and last but not least, Maxine Asdale, who's also with the ADHT. And Maxine needs no introduction, a lifelong educator, African Diaspora Heritage Trail advocate, always just a strong spirit of enabling, equipping, growing, motivating Bermudians youth. So with that, Maxine?
This is a reality. In 2030 and beyond, millions of jobs will be lost. The kinds of jobs that robot automation will take over means that the kinds of jobs that will be in your children, grandchildren's, nieces, nephews' future is going to be quite different from the jobs which there are today, even in Bermuda. So if this is true, as the world evolves and the opportunity for those kinds of things that these creative minds are thinking of, some of the jobs that you think your children will have or grandchildren will have will not be there. We're challenged with this. So that's the unknown. The best way to be prepared for the unknown is to start preparing now. So what do we know? We don't know what jobs are we. What do we know? We know that 70% of the jobs that will be available from now until 2030 and beyond will require something beyond high school. Right now, it could cost up to $20,000, $30,000 a year. Those kinds, and that's for college, but when you look at other kinds of jobs which require technical training, they are expensive also. So the opportunity for you when that young person is ready to go to that next phase of their education beyond high school is what you have to be thinking of now. We know, I know, as an educator, I've been an educator all my life. I started teaching when I was 18, which was like 10 years ago, just like 10. But I know that education is one of the most important things that we can ensure that our young people have. So the opportunity to save for post-secondary or tertiary education is one of the major roles that we as adults in this community should be about doing, and Heritage Educational Savings Plans helps you to do that. That's a company in Bermuda. It's from a Canadian company, but all of the people who work in our office are Bermudians. We are about trying to ensure, to help the Bermudian community ensure that they will be able to have their children attend a post-secondary education institution of their choice. So we do have, we're at the back there. When you have a moment, you can pop by and see us. So here are some facts about Heritage. We've been in the business for 30 years. Before I was just like 5 when they started. Last year, we paid out $3.4 million to Bermudian families. The plan allows you to invest what you can afford. The plan matures when the child turns 18. It offers a great return on your investment. If you just save at the bank, I'm going to tell you get 1.2%, 1.3%. Our return on your investment is much better than that. So I'm going to suggest that you be like Jeremy Lamb. I'm a basketball kind of person. And last week, Sunday, Jeremy Lamb did the most amazing thing. He was 3/4 of the way down the court. 3/4 of the way down the court. He made a decision. He was going to go for it. He set up a plan. He figured in his head how I'm going to do this, set up that plan, and then he met his goal and made that shot. I'm going to suggest that we as a community need to recognize that we need to make the decision that we're going to ensure that all of our young people have the best opportunities possible for post-secondary education. Then we're going to set up a plan, and I suggest the plan should be with Heritage Educational Savings Plans. And then we together will help you meet that goal.
Thank you as well for your whole piece that you wrote within the booklet. So ladies and gentlemen, page 8, Samaritans. It's all about Dr. Bradshaw's lodge, along with his brethren up at Cubs Hill, Warwick. Okay, so I just want to be able to give you a special thank you, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Bradshaw.
Good evening, all. Thank you very much for being here. And I'm going to follow along with my dear friend Maxine. And she talked about being an educator. I also am an educator. I also am very proud to say I'm a Friendly Society member, and to look around and see so many friendly societies represented here. And another important thing is that if you're in Bermuda, if you've enjoyed anything in Bermuda's social development, you have benefited from the Friendly Society connections. Having started back in the 1820s, we still, having had at one point maybe 70 or 80 lodges, we still have 5 functioning lodges. That's important history. That's an important something that you have done, you have created, because you've had this. The Friendly Societies, cooperativism is about self-help, becoming involved, taking the step, as Maxine says, boldly stepping out, and mutual help, doing it together. A quick note of a celebration. I mentioned the Loyal Mayflower Lodge, and they have their 100th celebration this year, and I have seen a few Mayflower sisters here. And somebody quickly, when is your 100th celebration? What day? May the 12th. 100 years. And that's the baby of the lodges. So we have a history. Any one of our lodge members can give you a recitation of the history and presence and prominence of their lodge. So please ask a lodge member where they come from and what their history is. And even if you don't know a lodge member, ask some of your family members, because you'll be surprised to find out how many of them were lodge people or associated with lodge people, because it's about cooperation. And one of our watchwords, strength in unity. Strength in unity. It's not about competition. It's about being different, but working together.
Works in a cooperative atmosphere. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Jessica to come forward and share her wealth of knowledge with us.
Cooperatives are companies or enterprises that are jointly owned by people in communities who create them for a need, to satisfy a need, to address a problem, to create better access, more affordable goods and services, etc. They're organized and governed in a specific way, which is what we call one person, one vote, about democratic participation. They're based on their values-based businesses. So the first value is, again, addressing a need and providing a service, equal profit sharing and equal decision-making power. And then also, to be a viable business, you still have to have a bottom line. You have to have some profit or some what we call surplus, so that you can continue to run the business the next year. It's all about shared risk and shared profit sharing. And cooperatives operate under 7 to 10 principles of cooperation, which actually the 10 Mondragon principles are in the back of your pamphlet, so I won't talk about that. One of the first things I had to learn about cooperatives when I decided to look at them as an urban development strategy was the ways that cooperatives are actually used by every group of people. When I first learned about them, it looked like they were only a sort of a device that Europeans used, and that then Europeans started teaching other people how to use. But the more I studied them, I actually found out that every people in the world have used them during every era of human civilization. So I want to talk to you about the history of African American cooperatives that I found. And I'm going to tell you that history first by giving you a quick overview, and then with examples and what I call 10 ways that cooperatives benefit their communities. So the first thing is that I wrote the book, Collective Courage, and I'm sorry about the long title, but that's why I put the short beginning title, Collective Courage. But I needed to say the other part of the title because it really is a history. It really is about cooperative economic thought, and it is about cooperative economic practice, and I didn't really know how to explain that without putting it all in the title. So I am an unapologetic academic, but I'm also a scholar activist. So I talk about in the book hundreds of mutual aid societies, black communal towns, examples of formal and informal economic cooperation, pretty much from the 1780s into the present, or at least the late 2000s. I found about 162 legally incorporated cooperatives, and some rural, some urban, starting in the mid-1800s. I also used the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, who some of you might know, an important scholar, an African-American scholar, and then the last days of his life he lived in Ghana. But he actually wrote a book before me in 1907 called Economic Cooperation Among Negro Americans, and I was able to use a lot of his early work and research to help me start the research I was doing, and so I also pepper the book with some of his findings and his information. And basically what we've both found, and what I found continued even after 1907, when Du Bois was talking about it, is the ways that co-ops have helped African Americans to save costs, increase income and wealth, combat racial discrimination by taking charge of their own economic activity, especially when they were either oppressed and exploited or left out of the economy. They used cooperatives to actually help them gain economic stability and self-sufficiency, save and create decent jobs, provide independence and self-determination, and also develop leadership, which turns out to be a huge piece. So it wasn't really just the economic benefits that we found. So the first thing I want to say is the important components that I found. The first one was most of the periods of time in at least African American history when co-ops were most prolific were the 1880s, the 1930s and 40s, and the 1960s and 70s. And the characteristics of those times were, one, strong black organizations that promoted cooperative economics and did cooperative economic education. So in all those three periods, and in most of the cases, the places that had strong black organizations doing this had the most cooperatives. Second, the places that had the most community support. So that's back to making sure you have a good dialogue with the community. They know what the co-op is, why it's there, what's happening, because the community support also then helps the co-ops to overcome some of the barriers of capitalization, the sabotage that I was talking about early on. The community helps to defend the co-op, and then the community is sometimes the client of the co-op, so that's very important. Having adequate resources and managing those resources properly, that's sort of education again, but also access to resources. Human energy and enthusiasm. I didn't really mention it before, but hopefully you saw that thread. It turns out, right, that again, the most successful co-ops are the ones that have people who really put in the time and energy. It's not just having, quote unquote, labor and capital, but this human energy, enthusiasm, ability to work with others. So either if you can train people or people that you already have who have that makes a big difference. Solidarity and trust, right? It's really hard to run these kind of co-ops if you don't have a sense of solidarity and trust, but again, those can be built if you pay attention to it, build it into an orientation and training, and keep watching, right, to make sure that people are bonding and trusting and connecting with each other and talking, right? Local control and intercooperation, so again, keeping it controlled by the community, cooperating with other groups and other co-ops that are doing this, reaching out and incorporating youth. Again, the co-ops that had a youth component and kept engaging youth were stronger than the ones that kind of just kept aging out. And the strong leadership role for women turned out to be all very important components. And finally, I found that the co-ops were transforming people's lives, as I said, not only creating leadership development, but also often changing, especially like the prison in Puerto Rico, where the inmates owned their own co-ops, they really transformed their lives, their outlook on life, the way they connected with other people, what they saw as their future, and even for the outside co-ops, that same kind of sense of giving you that renewed sense of what can be accomplished happens through a co-op. So I'll leave you with a quote by W.E.B. Du Bois, again, one of African Americans' great scholars. He says, by consumers and producers' cooperation, we can establish a progressively self-supporting economy that will wield the majority of our people into an impregnable economic phalanx. Thank you.